everywhere I go. The people really wanna know who I is and who I be. They stop and stare when they see me. If I said it once, no need to repeat. Run up on me, watch you fall to your knees. Tip my hat when it's time for the kill. Ain't no beast when you're really real. I am the boss, I am the dawn, I am the one.
Hey guys, it's Kiana again, and I wanted to come back to you with another video to help you pass your Georgia real estate exam. Again, my name is Kiana, and I am your favorite agent's instructor. So before we get started, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Make sure that you leave some comments down below about some content that you may want me to cover in future videos. So today we're going to come back and we're going to talk about agency. So when it comes to agency is very difficult for a lot of people to understand. So the first one I want to talk about is universal agency. So universal agency is where a person can do anything that the person that they have a universal agency for that they can do. So that's like your power of attorney. So that's like anything you can do, I could do better. I could do anything better than you. Well, that's how I remember universal agency, because it helps me to remember that I can go to the car dealership if I have universal agency for them and buy a car. I can go and sign for them to buy a house. So anything that that person can do, I can do. That is universal agency. All right, guys. So the next one I want to talk about is general agency. General agency is kind of like when you sign your affiliate agreement with your broker and you go and work for them as a salesperson. You are their agent and they are your client, meaning that they are your principal. So an example of general agency, I am able to buy them into everyday today business. And another example of that would be property management. So as a property manager, you are managing in the day-to-day business of the property for the landlord, and therefore you are a general agent for that landlord. So that is an example of general agency. The next one I would like to talk about is special or limited agency. This is where you are working with either a buyer or seller to conduct business such as buying or selling a house. So you are only representing them for that one transaction. So an example of that would be you enter into a buyer's brokerage agreement with a buyer to help them to buy a house. You are representing them for that one transaction to buy a house, meaning at that point which the transaction has closed and it is ended, that means that the agency ends with the close of the property. It is important to remember that with any agency, you owe them a fiduciary duty, meaning that you owe them loyalty, trust, and confidence. So you do owe them that loyalty and you owe them a fiduciary duty. So that is with any agency that you enter. So the next couple of ones that I want to explain is types of agency that you may be able to obtain at a brokerage. So these ones can become a little bit difficult for people to understand. So I will be inserting some slides to help you to understand them just a tad bit better. So the first one I want to explain to you is sub-agency. Sub-agency is when another broker works with a broker to represent a client, usually a seller client. So that's like XYZ agency calling over to ABC agency and saying, hey, do you have any agents available to represent my seller? That other agency will represent the seller, but the primary broker will remain the primary broker. So in this agency, you have two brokers, one client and one customer. Usually the buyer is a customer and they are not usually represented in this transaction. So how I get my students to remember this is they remember that there's 2, 1, 1, two brokers, one client and one customer. So like I said, the customer is usually a buyer and the client is usually the seller, and you have two brokers, one client and one customer. That is sub-agency. Sub-agency is something that was usually done way back in the 90s. It is not done much often anymore because, of course, brokers want to make the money for themselves. So that is sub-agency. The next one I want to talk about is dual agency. So when it comes to dual agency, this is your salesperson's dream because they are going to make money from both sides of the transaction. A dual agency requires informed consent. So it does require the consent of both the buyer and the seller because they are both clients and you owe both of them a fiduciary duty when you are doing a dual agency. So they have to consent in order for you to represent both of them in the same transaction. So with a dual agency, I always like to point out that there is one broker, one salesperson, and two clients. One who is a buyer client and another who is a seller client. They are being represented by the same brokerage and the same agent. And how I get my students to remember that one is there is one broker, one salesperson, and two clients. So that one is 112. So with dual agency, don't forget that you have to have informed consent because you owe a fiduciary duty to both of those clients, so which means that you owe them loyalty. There is one out there that could prevent you from having to owe loyalty to both clients, and we're about to talk about that one next. So the next one I want to talk about is designated agency. Designated agency is where we still have one brokerage representing both the buyer and the seller, but we have two salespersons who are now involved. And so with designated agency, we can prevent a dual agency because that salesperson will not owe a fiduciary duty. All they owe, though, because they are signed with that broker, the broker does owe them that loyalty and that fiduciary duty, but they will be able to separate it out because there are two salespersons involved in this transaction. So with a designated agency, you have one broker, two salespersons, one buyer client, and one seller client. They are both represented by the same brokerage, and it allows them to be able to discuss their information with their individual salesperson and not feel like the confidentiality and loyalty is being portrayed. So, with that being said, it is important for you to note that in designated agency, it is not okay for both of the salespeople to get together and talk about this at the water cooler or have a conversation about this amongst each other. So, with that being said, we talked about sub agency. So, remember, sub agency is two brokers, one client, and one customer. So, 211. We also talked about dual agency. Dual agency has one broker, one salesperson, and two clients. So 112. And then the last one we talked about was designated agency. Designated agency, we have one broker, we have two salespersons and two clients, and they are both represented on the same brokerage. And it is important to remember that with dual agency, just going back, that it does require an informed consent, and that you must not, with designated agency, talk about it at the water cooler with the other salesperson. So with that being said, today this is our video discussing agency. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any given moment. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video, and peace.